Smithsonian Anacostia Community Museum presents the following audio interview with Dr. Tom Bolton, Something's Been Lost. The interview takes place in London, where he is an author. The narrative is overlaid with photos illustrating the landscape and events described.
Most rivers disappeared really because they became polluted and rubbish was thrown into them and became a health hazard. And the reason that they were buried, so culverted and then covered over and then incorporated into the sewer system, was because there wasn't a sewer system. There wasn't a way of dealing with waste, with sewage, but also with rubbish and carcasses from animal markets, that sort of thing. So things like the River Fleet, which was a broad navigable channel running through central London, close to the city, is famous during the 18th century for being unbelievably filthy, for having dead dogs floating in it, for having the blood and entrails from Smithfield Market, where there was live slaughtering, dumped into the river. So Christopher Wren tried to landscape the Fleet. Well, after the fire of London, he rebuilt the city, and he tried to create a Venetian-style canal along the lower part of the Fleet, and it wasn't practical because the water was simply too filthy, and it wasn't a pleasant place to be, and it was covered over. So until London had a sewer system that could handle the amount of waste that was produced, it ended up in these rivers. So they were extremely polluted and understandably seen as a problem. And often the only way to deal with that was to put them underground, out of sight. When the sewer system was put in place in the late 19th century, the people finally realised that the size of the city, the growth of the city, was overloading all the systems that had previously just about managed, particularly the waterways. The rivers were incorporated into the system in storm sewer tunnels mostly, because it's very hard to stop a river from flowing. You can't just stop it up and make it go away. It's much easier to redirect it. So one of the things that's culturally fascinating, I think, and keeps people interested in the idea of these rivers is the fact they are still there, they are still flowing, and often along pretty much exactly the course they used to follow, just directed into a storm sewer. So you can go underground, you can go, if you're lucky enough, into the sewer system, and you can see the River Fleet, for example, flowing rapidly underground, and it's still flowing fast enough that you need weighted boots to stand up in it. You can't stand up in the stream, it's too powerful. So these rivers have a real presence, and the fact they've disappeared is it's about circumstance, really, in the way that London grew and the way it was planned, in the wrong order, really. The infrastructure came afterwards, and they can never really be removed from the system. So there are many rivers in London that aren't buried. There are many that are just tucked away, some that just flow normally, and London is a very big thing. So there are 20 maybe rivers running into the Thames within the boundaries of Greater London. That's just main ones, without looking at any tributaries, of which there are hundreds. But if you're looking at central London, the oldest bits, then the rivers that have been incorporated into storm sewers are staying there, basically, because you can't get rid of those without dismantling a very complicated and enormous Victorian tunnel system. So it's a legacy of industrial London that we've lost a number of these really important streams. But the fact they're still there means that people, I think, feel something's been lost that might be recoverable, and people often feel that they can bring them back in some way.